Hey, welcome to a bit of a different video today. We're not necessarily going to be reviewing a specific video so much as talking about why we review video and what we can try to do to get more out of it. So if you haven't been here before or seen these videos before, my name is Karai. I'm out of the Iron Mountains in Colorado. Um, Doing a lot of video review lately on this channel, Deliberate Wactus, and specifically for Amped Guard, with the intent that myself, I'm pushing towards an award called Warlord. It's just for being a really really good stick fighting nerd. um, but one of the things that comes up with, or that I've kind of been thinking about with how much video review I've been doing lately, is kind of talking about why we do video review and what the goal is. So ultimately, the easy answer for something like why do we, you know, take video is, to get better, right? So what does that mean for us? When we're looking at video, like this one here with Roland and Warlord Garion, right? What if we're looking to review this? What are we looking for? If we're looking to review it for either of them, we are potentially looking for things that they did well that they can build off of. We're looking to see how they move, where they orient their feet, what their composure even is like, what their mental state is like in competitive situations, if that's what we're doing. And we're looking to understand what kind of patterns people fall into and what they do maybe poorly, what they could do a lot better. Is their guard compromised when they step a certain way? Do they fall for a very specific type of feint? Do they just get completely out of a good mental state when they've lost a couple fights? And these are all things that we can look at for other people and give feedback on. But additionally, we can look at other people's video for things that they do that we like. For instance, that's a great example right here. This little body fake with a hand pump that Garion has to open up Roland's shoulder, right? And the great thing about video is that it allows us to slow things down and look at what is happening almost frame by frame if we want to, you know? It allows us to start to break down and recognize patterns and understand why a thing is happening. And additionally, when it comes to looking at your own video, a lot of us seem to have a hard time looking at our own video and getting anything actionable out of it. And I know I'm like that sometimes. I take video for the sake of having other people look at it, but I'm not the best at looking at it myself. I don't like to post video where I don't do well, but ultimately, the video where you do worst is usually the video that you're going to get the most useful feedback out of. Not always, but that seems to be my experience with it. For instance, this video here was a first to 10 with Vulcan where I repeatedly made a very similar mistake with my footwork. And while I could kind of talk about what I was doing a little bit after the fact of these fights, very shortly afterwards, it wasn't until I sat down and watched through the video that I realized just how egregious some of my choices were. Primarily, the way that I tried to keep throwing my hips and my feet back, hand blocking, and throwing across for the shoulder. And ultimately, doing that too much and too transparently costs me a lot of wins. And this was a fight that I believe we got to, in this first attempt, I got to 9, and then Vulcan brought it back and beat me. So while this may not be the type of video that we want to see from ourselves, it's important to be able to look at this kind of um, playback of ourselves and understand that it's not a judgment of ourselves to look at this and say, oh, I did this poorly, and think that somehow makes it where we're not going to be able to fix it again. Rather, it helps us highlight issues in our guard or in our approach, in the way that we face a fight. Along with trying to throw my feet back repeatedly, I continually collapsed my guard. Because I was able to look at this video and think about that for the next time. The most recent time that Vulcan and I had fought, one of the issues I fixed was to make sure that I projected my guard. And while I still like to give a little bit of ground, I focused on making sure that my hips were not flying back and compromising my position. And I was able to keep a steady amount of pressure on by keeping my feet and my stance overall uncompromised without throwing my shoulders and my hips around in all sorts of weird ways. Ultimately, that's just a long way of saying I did a better job at not trying to just outrange him by getting into a bad position. And constantly you see here, even in this video, the thing I always want to do is throw this cross back to Vulcan's arm, and it does not pay off for me most of the time. A lot of the time in here, the wins that I got seem to have been out of luck or Vulcan potentially doing something less optimal or more exploitable than me actually doing something correctly. Now, along with this, sometimes we're looking at video of people who are far better than us. A favorite of mine is Tato versus Brett from Clan 2016. Okay, these are two extremely high-level fighters. If you don't know who either of them are, I highly encourage you to go look for video of Warlord Brett and Warlord Tato. But what we can see here is how they approach fights with people who are at different heights, different capabilities. And yeah, they're both extremely skilled. They're both Warlord Sword Knights, or they were at the time. But their problem-solving approaches are very different, and especially because of the difference in their height, their reach, their body types, and their overall background. It's possible that you can come through and take a look at these type of videos and use the features that are available to you through YouTube, such as frame by frame on the little less than or greater than buttons, using the slow-mo replay to break down what happened. And if you see things that you like that they have done, you can take them and modify them for yourselves and try to adapt them into your own game plan. One of the things that I hadn't caught on some of my initial watches of this, that I only really caught recently, was at times when Tato approaches, because he is shorter than his opponent and has less reach, he seems to start an approach, and when he sees that Brett is likely to throw back, he backs off a little bit and attacks the arm instead of continuing to close very hard. And while that might seem like a no-brainer at times, it helps to see it in action and to look at the way that these fighters might approach the situation. For me, having been closely associated with Tato, I really like his fighting style and I like to emulate it. That being said, constantly taking inspiration from only the same source is a great way to stagnate. I highly recommend that you look at people outside of your belt line, your training group, outside of your kingdom's fighting style, outside of ways that you would prefer to fight, and find ideas for yourself. People that I have been following at times are Anatole and Shion, or even here, Lily, Sunshine, and Anatole. No, we're not doing this. And so you can look at the way that people from different areas move, different kingdoms and different fighting companies approach a situation. If you don't know how to fight a dome shield, going and watching video of how people other than yourself would fight one is a great way to learn how to do so. Ultimately, when we're reviewing footage, whether it's for ourselves as looking at the fights we had recently, whether it's looking at footage of extremely good fighters that we want to be able to beat or to be like, whether it's reviewing tape with the intent to provide feedback that is actionable for our friends. There's a lot of different reasons that you can review tape, and there's a lot of different ways that you can engage with it. But I think ultimately, if you keep in mind that the goal is to make yourself and make those around you better, and you approach it with the intent to find meaningful, actionable feedback, meaning things that they can quickly enact to make a change that ends up paying off, rather than some nebulous thing like you've got to approach the fight with a little more je ne sais quoi, right? It doesn't help. But if you talk to them about, I noticed this pattern that you had, or I noticed this pattern that I had, or I noticed this thing that Anatole or Shion or Lily Sunshine or Eggman or Brad or Tato did that I really liked, and you use that to build your own gameplay, your own understanding of a fight, then I really don't think you can go wrong here. I apologize for the way that this is rambled just a touch, but I hope ultimately it has been of some use, and that with that in mind, we can see a greater engagement and appreciation for combat video feedback as we go forward. So thank you for listening to my ramble. This has been Karai with Deliberate Wactus. And see you guys later.